Nice and air conditioned in here.
Ah, it's great. Can't beat that work.
What more could you want?
In the summertime in Los Angeles?
Oh man. So yeah, here's the room. Just watch your step.
The drum dungeon, as we'd say. Oh man. I said the drum dungeon. Yeah, it's the drum pit. Anthony Tiny Biuso for drumline.net. Today we have a special guest, Russ Nyberg. He is here in Los Angeles with the hit Broadway show, Miss Saigon. And he is giving us a bird's eye inside view to his world down here in the pit at the lovely, beautiful, historic Pantages Theater. Russ, thank you so much for having me.
Hey,
man.
thanks for coming down and checking it out.
This is freaking fantastic. Number one, my Mohawk loves this temperature because it's fully air conditioned in here. Russ Nyberg in the pit. So I was looking at your history and coming from historical classic Broadway productions like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Peter Pan, things like that. What is it that you're bringing to the table with Miss Saigon that maybe another guy might have missed?
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was the first big kind of Broadway tour I got asked to play. On that show, we actually had two percussionists, myself and then another guy that just did timpani and the mallets and all the other stuff. That was a unique show because it was, you know, classic Broadway style, but sort of on the vein of like Mary Poppins, you know, kind of thing. It was a real test where I had to learn how to play in the pit. You know, I had to control my volume. It's all about style because many shows, including that one, have different stylistic types of things that you have to be able to adapt. And you don't want to sound like, you know, you're trying to cover everything all the time, and
right.
It's, you know, the classical moments you really want to sound classical, the pop stuff you really want to sound, you know, in that world, and the jazz stuff, you know, has to sound jazzy.
Right.
So I learned a lot on that first tour.
Nice.
And then on the show The Grinch, that was a Christmas show I got asked to do a couple years on the road and do it for 2 years at the Opry in Nashville. And that show was definitely drum set, but there was a lot of timpani and some orchestral stuff, so incorporated. So I really had to be able to combine that and put my hat on as far as trying to cover everything.
What's your favorite piece to play during the show?
In the show?
And it has to be that way because it incorporates some really wonky sound that you get to just kind of go.
Yeah.
Because there's always that one.
Oh yeah. So the one we have, it's called Morning of the Dragon, and it's a march with, you know, the Vietnamese army, and it's one of those pieces that has nothing to do with anything else in the show, but it's a real military kind of thing. In New York, this was written for 2 players on Broadway, down to 1 player, and we've had to put some of the timpani and some of the other elements of the second player into the second keyboard out here. And the rest of it, they've kind of thrown it on me that I have to cover everything. So it's a lot of march kind of stuff.
Action. Nice. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And yeah, you have to have all those different sounds. That's why, you know, folks who aren't drummers, if you're taking a look at all this stuff for the first time, we're not cavemen.
No.
This is an interesting, complex instrument that takes time and energy and schooling and tons of practice to get as good as Russ here to be doing it.
One thing that I was really lucky about was, you know, originally because it was combined on 1 player, they wanted to put a lot of the gongs and those elements all on the electronic pad. And that would have been fine, and you know, you could just tap it and do it. But it was important to me to really try to, you know, have all the real gongs here and make it acoustic.
That's all. And as drummers, like when we're on gigs, we don't normally tell other folks this, but we do a lot of things that incorporate what makes us feel good and what makes us happy and what makes us feel fulfilled as a musician, as a player. Not necessarily always telling everyone involved, they don't need to know all the ins and outs, and it's not a bad thing.
No.
But sometimes you don't want to let people know that you're having such a good time. You just
Exactly.
want to do what you do,
Absolutely.
and say, hey man, I'd like to do this organically because it feels good and it sounds the
Sure.
best. Meanwhile, it's just because you just love having bells and you love having all these little elements around, and that is what's so beautiful about percussion.
And it's fun.
Yeah, and it's fun.